Welcome to Online Sales 101. If you have seen my previous Artist Alley 101, this is basically going to be something really similar, where I'll basically try to give you as much information as I can so that you guys can make like an educated decision on what you want to do for your online shop. I'm probably going to talk a lot based on my personal experience. Some of that stuff might not apply to you, some of it might. So it's really kind of up to you guys, and I just hope it's like informative. I did want to mention my background again for my online sale things, just so you guys know where I'm coming from. So I've been doing online sales since 2015. So I started in Artist Alley in like 2014, 2013-ish, and I've personally used a couple different sites. So I use Society6, Etsy, StoreMD, Ticktail, Wix, and Imprint. So these are the ones that I personally have experience with. The other ones are based on information I found off the internet or from other friends, so I can't speak for it myself, but that's just what I found. And the last thing I do want to note is that I'm a hobby artist, which means I don't rely on this for my full-time income. And so if you do want to make this your full-time income, then I think there is definitely a lot more that you are going to have to look into, but I hope this is kind of a good starting point for you to get your information. So, okay. I did also want to just kind of showcase the kind of products that I have. Everybody's products are really different, and depending on what your product is, the way you approach online sales might be a little bit different. I have pretty typical Artist Alley goods like charms, notebooks, buttons, and things like that. So this is just a quick overview of all of the stuff that I wanted to talk about over the course of, I think it's going to be about 3 streams for this specific topic. So today we're going to be talking about a quick introduction, and then I'll talk about online shop types, different sites. And then the next stream, I think next Friday, we'll talk about store branding, packaging and shipping. And then on the last stream, I'll probably talk about customer service and interactions, including things like on social media. And then talk about some administrative work, which I'm hoping I'll include my taxes and stuff like that. And also kind of a what to expect when you first start your shop. A quick disclaimer, I'm not going to be talking about anything regarding like what to draw, what to make, or anything like that. I'm going to assume that the people listening to the stream know kind of like what they are planning to sell, the kind of artwork or the kind of like products and merchandise they want to sell. So I'm not going to be talking about any of that. If you are interested, you can look up my Artist Alley 101 streams. Okay, so just a quick introduction. Selling online is a really good way for you to share your products and to share your crafts with like a much bigger audience than if you are at like just a convention or like a local like farmers market sale or anything like that. And it's really nice because you don't ever have to leave your house except like maybe to go to the post office. And if you are someone who's coming in from like the Artist Alley side of things, it's a really good idea because your audience is no longer limited to the people at the convention, because there are a lot of fans that don't really go to conventions just because maybe they don't have the means to drive themselves or fly themselves there, or maybe they're a little bit like scared to go because they don't have any other friends who want to go or anything like that. But it's a really good way to be like, oh, I'm selling in California, but if you're on the East Coast, you can still buy this on my online shop. Online sales are great. There's not a lot of cons to online sales, in my personal opinion, except for the fact that it takes a lot of work. Not to scare anybody, it's just to kind of know what you're getting yourself into. It is a lot of work. But other than that, I think it's filled with like a lot of fun and good things and rainbows, and so. But there are definitely a couple things to keep in mind. And so I just listed a couple of them here. The first one is you will need to be 18 for a lot of like sales or business related stuff that you can do on the internet. So for example, if you are getting a shop and you want to link it to a PayPal, a lot of stores require you to have a PayPal business account. And I believe in order to have a PayPal business account, you need to be at least 18. So if you're under 18, I would suggest either, make sure your parents can like sign off on certain things for you, or even like have an older friend basically be your proxy seller for these online things. The second point is that the internet is really an open space for everybody. The internet is an open space, and that includes children. And so if you have anything that is, maybe not friendly for all ages, it might be a good idea to just have like an everyone rated, like a preview, or like blur things out. So if you have like an R18 dojin and you have like previews, you don't want like a 13-year-old come to your site and accidentally click on your previews that could be R18. So just make sure those things are like either blurred out or just like, not visible and stuff like that. And the last point is, if you are coming in from the artist alley side of like sales, I do just want to mention that online sales don't necessarily reflect trends that are seen in Artist Alley. So, for example, I personally sell like a pretty big amount of prints when I go to Artist Alley. But if I'm selling online, I sell maybe one print a month. And I sell far more like merchandise. And obviously this isn't like a rule that everybody's sales are going to be different between Artist Alley and online shops, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. And the last thing I have here in really big bold letters is that an online shop is a lot of work. Not to scare anybody, I just want to be straightforward with people who are like really looking into doing it. I think this is the biggest thing that I wanted to know before I started, is that it was more work than I was expecting. So it's definitely really rewarding, and I don't regret ever doing it at all, but it is a lot of work. I am now going to get started on talking about different online shop types and sites. I think this is really the biggest question I see a lot for people who are just starting out. I always see questions that are like, oh, what's the best site to sell stuff on? And the short answer to that question is that there isn't a best site. Every site is very different, and there's pros and cons to every single site. And so it really depends on like how you want to sell your artwork, how wide of an audience do you want. Again, I'm just hoping that this will be like a lot of information that you guys can take in and like figure it out and then come up with a decision of what you guys think is best for you. The other disclaimer I do want to mention really quick is that I have a lot of like terms in these slides in this stream. None of them are like official business terms. They're just terms that I think is self-explanatory and I think makes sense with the topic. And so I just want to make sure like nobody is like going to Google and typing like self-fulfilled shops and then nothing comes up and be like, oh, she was lying. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that these words are just kind of picked by me and not really like business official. So, okay. There's two main types of e-commerce shops that I have noticed that artists use. The first one is an outsourced shop, and that is basically where you do the artwork, and obviously, and you give not give, but you allow a third party company to use that artwork with credit, of course, and they take care of all of the orders and all of the manufacturing and shipping for you. So it's a really easy way to kind of sell your art. The second one that I think is really the main type of shop that I think people are interested in is a self-fulfilled shop. So in this one, you have an online shop that might be hosted on a site, but you make the products, you take in orders, you ship it out all on your own. These are the two main things, they run very differently. So I just kind of want to go over both of them. Here are some of the examples of the outsourced and fulfilled shops. So for outsourced, there's things like Redbubble, Society 6, Imprint. DeviantArt gets overlooked a lot, but it is also an outsourced shop. Um, for self-fulfilled shops, there's a lot of really common names like Etsy, Store Envy, but there's also things like Squarespace, Wix, Big Cartel, which are what I call decentralized systems. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I'm going to start out with the outsourced shops first, because we have a lot to talk about the self-fulfilled shops, and I kind of want to save that for later. So in an outsourced shop, like I said, you first draw your art, do whatever. If you are a traditional artist, you can scan your artwork in and like upload it onto the website. But you basically send your artwork to some kind of third company, like Society 6 or Imprint, and a customer will basically go to the site. You'll have like your own little artist profile, like Dagnio's Artworks, and like it'll have your artworks. They can order from your profile, and all of the printing, the shipping, customer service will be done by this company that you have given your artwork to. Some of the pros of this kind of shop is that there is basically no work required beyond you putting in like your work to actually make the art. You don't have to go to a con and set up or anything like that. You don't have to do any of the administrative work. You just upload and like let it go. Another pro is that it doesn't require any inventory, so you don't have to make any of the products yourself. You don't have to ship it yourself, which means you don't have to keep an inventory of all your products, and you also don't have to have things like boxes or packaging or bubble wrap or any of that because you're not the one making the stuff. The last pro for an outsourced shop is that it is liability free, which means like if a shipment goes missing, that's not your problem. If the poster that is delivered is like pixelated or like damaged in some way, that's not your problem. Those are all problems that the company has to figure out. So you don't have to deal with any of that kind of administrative work. But there are definitely cons. The biggest con is that there is a very low profit margin. Because the outsourced company is doing all of the printing and the shipping and the customer service, they're the ones that are going to keep most of the money that comes from selling your artwork. So just to give an example, I'll talk a little bit more about this, but if I sell a print on Society 6, I get maybe 10%, and the 90% goes to the actual company. The second biggest issue is lack of personal contact. So you're not directly interacting with your customers. So there is not really a sense of like buying from a small artist. It's more like you're buying from a company who happens to have artwork from a small artist. Some people really like interacting with their customers, so that's a really big downside. And the last one, and I think this is the one that really keeps most Artist Alley people out of outsourced shops, is that you have very little control over your product. You can only print what the outsourced company can print. And so they're going to be basically the limiters in the kind of products that you offer on your like little store. So if the company sells mugs, that's great. But if they want something like keychains that have like little dangling accessories that are really common, in Artist Alley, you're not going to be able to make any of that with an outsourced shop. So I think that's really the biggest reason people don't like to do it. Okay, so these are some of the outsourced shops, like the really big names. There's definitely other stores that aren't on this list. Redbubble, Society 6, Imprint, and DeviantArt. And I'm just going to talk about the pros and cons for each one, kind of going like sideways. Redbubble, the biggest thing it has going for it is it has a really big range of products, like the jack of all trades for any kind of product that you can sell and like with your artwork on it. So it's got everything from like duvet covers to like stickers to like obviously prints and things like that. Some of the big cons to Redbubble is that, in my personal opinion, they seem to have lower quality control. So my boyfriend was gifted a print that was bought on Redbubble once, and like it was kind of like pixelated and like the art quality wasn't very good, which makes me think that the company isn't doing a very good job of like checking the resolution of the artworks and things like that. So that's kind of a downside for me. And the biggest reason that I really discourage people from using Redbubble is that there's a lot of art theft on it. And maybe it's gotten a little bit better, but like at least even like a year ago, there was so much art theft on it. And by that, I mean people who will download images off the internet and they'll make a profile on Redbubble and they'll upload that artwork onto Redbubble and then sell it that way. But that's not their artwork, so they're making money off of somebody else's work. And theoretically speaking, that's not really like Redbubble's fault, because in order to make your profile and sell your artwork, you do need to say that, oh, this artwork is mine. And so if like those people who are stealing art are lying, but I think it is the job of the website to kind of enforce that. And it seems like Redbubble is doing a pretty terrible job of enforcing that. I've also heard in the past that there are cases where if you sell something on Redbubble and you decide you don't want to be on Redbubble anymore and you shut down your profile, they still continue to sell your work but not give you any money because you no longer have an account. That might be something that they fixed in the like fixed already. I'm not entirely sure, but it's something that I've heard happen a couple times and I think that's a really big problem. And so I personally don't recommend people use Redbubble, and that's kind of the reason why. Moving on to the next one, Society 6. So Society 6, I think, has not quite as large of a range of products as Redbubble, but definitely a lot compared, especially to Imprint and DeviantArt. And as far as I can tell, they seem a little bit more professional and like a little bit more um, like picky about the quality of their products, at least from what I've seen. So I do recommend Society 6 if you want to print your artwork on a lot of different types of things, but you don't want to work with Redbubble. The biggest downside to Society 6 that I've noticed is that they have really high commission costs. They take on average 90% of the cost of the product. So if I sell a $25 t-shirt on Society 6, I see $2.50 out of that. And so it's cool that somebody has a t-shirt out there with like pictures of chocobos that I drew, but at the same time I only get $2.50 for it. The second thing I do want to mention, it might not necessarily be a con depending on your art style, but it is personally a con for me, is that Society 6, I think, is very much geared towards aesthetic. So there's a lot of like design pieces. And so things like illustrations, paintings, those kind of things I feel like don't do quite as well in Society 6. Again, that's something that's really, dependent on the artwork and the artist. Moving on to the next one, Imprint. Imprint has a lot of really good things going for it. One big thing I noticed is that it is very artist centric. So they always have like artist of the week and like featured artists and stuff like that. And they do a good job of making it really seem like they're a company that's trying to help independent artists rather than Redbubble or Society 6, which really feel like a business that happens to have art from independent artists. Kind of in line with that, they have really low commission cost when they sell their items. So I think on their site, like a 12 by 18 inch print, I think the sells for about $20, and for any print sold, you get to keep 50% of that cost. So if I sell that $20 print, I get a full $10 off of that sale, which is amazing if you compare it to something like Society 6, which if I sold something that was $20, I would only get $2 out of it. The last thing I think that it has going for it is that it is very reputable. And I think it's because of these last 2 points that I mentioned, that they have low commission cost and they're very artist centric. But there's a lot of really big name, high profile illustrators and artists that sell their artwork on Imprint. The biggest downside, I think, and the reason maybe not everybody is on Imprint, is that you have to either apply and be juried by the Imprint community or be invited by somebody who's already on Imprint. So if you are just starting out and you maybe don't have that many like artworks to show on your profile, it might be a little bit more difficult to get into Imprint. The other thing is that they only print prints, canvases, and phone cases and nothing else. But if, you're an illustration based artist, usually the most important things that you want to sell are probably prints and canvases. And so Imprint, I think, is a really good one for that. And the last one I want to talk about is DeviantArt. I think a lot of people forget that you can actually sell on DeviantArt, but I did want to mention it on here because there are still quite a bit of artists who are on DeviantArt who might, want to look into this. So the biggest pro that it has is that it's streamlined with your DeviantArt profile. So you don't have to make like a separate account. If you have a DeviantArt profile, you can sell artwork on it, as long as you're like 18 and everything like that. The biggest downside to selling on DeviantArt is that it is original art only. So you can't sell any fan art and stuff. And the reason for that is because DeviantArt is such a big profile art like community that they do a lot of collaborations with, like, they've done things with Square Enix. And so I think they don't want to kind of step on anyone's toes in terms of like having copyrighted artwork sold on their website. So that's a big downside. If you want to sell fan art, DeviantArt is not for you, but it's available. The other downside to it is I think DeviantArt is never really looked at as a store. It's really looked at as like an art site. And so you might hear people be like, "Oh, I'm gonna go shop on Etsy," but you don't ever hear people be like, "I'm gonna go shop on DeviantArt." So, um, people when they're on DeviantArt aren't in the mindset to buy something. So now that we've talked about outsourced shops, we're gonna go to the other store that I think more people are interested in, which is the self-fulfilled shops. For these shops, basically, you as the artist or a crafter make your artwork, print it out, make your charms, make your plush and things like that, and you host some kind of store on the internet, and the customers order and you directly get that order yourself, like to your email and everything. And you take the items, you package it up, and you ship it all by yourself. Some of the really big pros of this, you have complete freedom over your product. So if you want to like take your coffee cup and like draw on it and then like sell it, like that's totally okay for you to do. If you want to repurpose a chair into a sculpture and sell it, that is something you can still do. And so you can really do whatever kind of product you are able to make. The second thing is that there is a lot of personal connection to customers. So when people buy from you, they are directly buying from you. And so I sometimes get like messages like, "Oh my God, thank you for doing, Tweewee artwork," or something like that. And I get those messages and it makes me really happy that this person is like buying that product or buying that artwork. So it's very rewarding to have your own store. The last thing is that it has a really high profit margin. And because there's no like third person involved that is taking care of like manufacturing and printing and stuff, you get basically all the profit that comes from selling the artwork like by itself. So you get, just as much money as if you sell something at a convention. There are definitely cons to doing a self-fulfilled shops, just things to keep in mind. I've said this like
3 times already, but it is really work intensive because you are doing all of the work, not just like making and shipping and stuff, but all of the administrative work. You are in charge of customer service. So if a package gets lost, if something is damaged in transit, that's something that you as the shop owner will have to now figure out. And the last one, I've already kind of touched on this, is that there's a lot of administrative work. So things like taxes, inventory keeping, all of that will have to be done by you. You could get a helper, you could hire a helper, but it is something that you as the store owner will have to take care of instead of like a third party. So now that we have talked about self-fulfilled shops, I want to kind of go a little bit deeper into the anatomy of a self-fulfilled shop. So there's two main types of self-fulfilled shops, and that is centralized and decentralized. So if you have a centralized store, you are basically one store that have, your own profile with your own products and stuff, but it is basically connected to every other store in that site. It would be kind of like having a shop in a mall. So there you have your own shop. If you go into like Hollister, it's Hollister. Like it's not like Walmart where everything's mixed together. But if you go out the door, there's a big mall area where you can see everybody else's work. A decentralized shop, on the other hand, is a little bit more like a brick and mortar store where it's not connected necessarily to anybody else's store. And so you can't, there isn't like a specific location. We call that location a marketplace, by the way, and I'll kind of talk about that as I go. But there's no marketplace where your product is lined up next to other people's products. Everything on that decentralized shop is there. So there's definitely pros and cons to each one, and I'm going to get into that and also talk about the different stores. But a centralized store is generally a little bit higher traffic. So if you think about kind of my analogy of it being a mall, if you go into the store, you might be going in to go to GameStop, but then on the way to GameStop, you might see like a board game shop and be like, that's a cool board game that I see in the window. I'm going to go check it out. And so there is traffic that might not necessarily have been headed towards your store originally, but kind of come in because they saw it in the marketplace. For a decentralized shop, the biggest pro it has is that it generally has much lower or zero commission cost. And so if you are somebody who brings in a lot of traffic on your own, a decentralized shop is actually cheaper for you to have than a centralized shop where they might take commission. Here are some examples of each type of store. So centralized stores I think are really the most common in like the artist alley community. So there's Etsy, Store Envy, Ticktail. All of these stores, they have like your own profile where you have your own products to showcase, but it's connected to a marketplace where your products are listed with everything else. And for decentralized shops, these are basically your kind of like cookie cutter e-commerce shops. So Wix, Weebly, Big Cartel, Squarespace, Shopify is a big one. I'm not including it for reasons I'll talk about later, but those are all decentralized shops because if you host your shop on there, it's not connected to other people's shops, even if they're all on Wix. I want to talk a little bit more about the centralized shops because I think that's what most people are interested in. It's the most common. It's kind of like having a shop in a mall. There's like a little marketplace where there's like little people walking around and checking out like your stores. This area in the middle here is called the marketplace. If a customer purchased something from inside of that mall, from this marketplace, usually the store will take a commission. So Etsy will like take like 5% of the transaction. On the other hand, you can also have a storefront where if you think about like Macy's or Sears on a mall, you don't have to go through the mall to get through Macy's. So if the customer goes in through the main doors on the outside of the mall through to Macy's, the mall itself or like Etsy will not take commissions from you because you're driving that traffic by yourself. Some stores require your shop to be in the marketplace, some stores don't, so that's something that you guys can kind of look into. Just all in all, centralized shops are really good for artists who don't necessarily have a big pre existing following. If you don't really have the means to drive that traffic yourself, if you go to a centralized shop and make sure your products are tagged in the right way, you're going to have traffic just through the marketplace because people will see your products. But if you are an artist who sells a lot of items, the commissions that they take from purchases from within the marketplace will start to add up, so it might not be the best for you. This is just a really quick overview of each of these stores. I'm actually going to talk a little bit more in detail about the first three here, again, because I think they're the most popular. So Etsy, really well established, huge customer base. There's a lot of really good extras that it has already built into the system. Just because it's been around for so long. The main issue with it is that it has a lot of commission fees that really start to add up if you have high traffic, and its customer base is a little bit different from what you usually expect at a con. For Store Envy is at this point, I think, the only store that has a free storefront. It used to be that TikTok had a free storefront. I don't think that's the case anymore. But it is also very well known in the artist alley community. If you are at a con and be like, oh, I have a store envy, even the customers, the people who are going to the conventions, they're going to know what you're talking about just because store envy is a pretty household name at this point. The biggest gripe I personally have with store envy is that it now makes customers pay a transaction fee. So if you buy a $10 charm on store envy, the store envy will make the customer pay a $2 transaction fee. Um, that's something that I'm personally against. I would have preferred to pay that instead of the customer. But it's how they are making money from storefront purchases at this point. So that's something to keep in mind. Tigtail was really good in that it gave a lot more flexibility in terms of how your store looked. It had a lot more templates compared to Store Envy or Etsy, and it had a lot of different features that Store Envy didn't really provide. At extra cost, but they were there if you wanted it. The biggest issue with Tigtail that I have is that now it used to have a free storefront, but now the storefront costs money and you can't shut down the marketplace. Store Envy is really nice that it lets you actually shut down your marketplace. So if you don't want anybody coming in from the marketplace because those transactions take commission, you can shut that down. Tigtail will not let you do that. And this is a change that they made a little less than a year ago, and it's the main reason I personally left. It's really up to you to kind of see if that's something that bothers you or not. And I also have eBay and Amazon on here, mainly to share like why it's not a good idea to sell on these. So their pros are that they have a huge audience. Everybody uses Amazon. The biggest issue is that if you're on eBay or Amazon, the people who are on those stores have the mindset of like buying things as cheaply as possible. Like if you're someone like me that likes like to save money, you go to like a mall, you see an item, and instead of buying it, you look up how much it costs on Amazon. And if it's cheaper at Amazon, you're just going to buy it on Amazon. And so people who are on Amazon are in the mindset of buying cheap things. And so artwork from independent artists fall under the luxury category. And so it is really the wrong customer audience for it. So this is now we're going to start getting into the really nitty gritty comparisons between all three of these like big centralized sites. So first of all, I want to talk about the storefront and market information. I've already talked a little bit about it, but again, Etsy is built on its marketplace. That's how it like rose up as like the artist place to sell in the first place. So it is definitely required. In terms of costs, they cost, there's a 20-cent cost to posting a listing, and every time that item sells, even if you say you have like an inventory of 10 items, every time it sells, you have to relist it, and that costs another 20 cents. And on top of that, it takes 5% commission, and that commission doesn't come only from the cost of the product, but it also comes from the product cost plus the shipping. So if you have a $10 charm, it costs 20 cents to post it, and then if somebody buys it for $10 plus $3 of shipping, then Etsy still takes another 5% of that $13 total. So you can see how it like really starts to add up. If you sell $10 charms and you sell 20 of them, they have now taken $15-20 of your cost. So it does really start to add up. That being said, it's got a huge audience, and we'll kind of get back into that. They do kind of a storefront, but it is $10 per month. They're raising the price to $20 a month starting in January. And it isn't like a traditional storefront. They will still take the same commission fees. So it doesn't actually matter if you go to the storefront or the marketplace. It's almost just like a prettier version of your Etsy profile, if that makes sense. The second one here is Store Envy. Again, if you have a marketplace, I think I already mentioned this, but they will take 10% commission for any purchases done through the marketplace. And on top of that, they will still take a $1 to $2 customer fee based on the cost of the item. It is optional though, so you can shut down your marketplace profile and just go to your storefront, which is free, but will still take that $1 to $2 customer fee. For Ticktail, you have to have your marketplace. It also takes a 10% commission. A storefront now actually costs extra money at $9 a month. It comes with a lot of good perks, but it is for cost. And there is no option to shut off your marketplace, even if you get a storefront. So now we're going to talk about the community on each of these, because I think that's also a really big part of choosing where you want to sell your artwork. If you're on Etsy, you've got everything from crafters to wholesalers. So you have people selling like charm parts and like jump rings and stuff like that next to people who sell like handcrafted jewelry. So there is a really wide range of the artists that sell there. And because of that, it also has a really huge customer base. But because it also has a lot of these indie crafters that might not fall into the artist alley category, there's also, I've noticed, a lot of customers who tend to be a little bit older that aren't necessarily like anime or comic or video game fans. They just want something aesthetic and cool. They'll go to Etsy. I just want to mention that because there will be people who will like buy something and sometimes expect a certain thing based on the items that they've bought previously on Etsy. They might not have kind of an understanding of how Artist Alley artists work. So I just want to mention that really quick. Not to say that like they're bad or anything, it's just kind of a different audience than what you'd usually expect, for example, at a convention. So if you go to Store Envy, generally the sellers that are still on there, there's a lot of Artist Alley sellers, and I've personally noticed they tend to be like the younger ones. And there's also a lot of aesthetic product sellers. And so by that, I mean people who sell like aesthetic clothing or like bags and stuff. I personally have a red backpack with a fried egg on it, and it says like my bag in Japanese. It's like very aesthetic things. So those are the kind of sellers that are on Store Envy. And in terms of customers, I do notice a lot of people use Marketplace on Store Envy. And they generally tend to be people who really understand kind of the Artist Alley community, people who really like fan art, like to support artists, who go to cons and things like that, and also people who are looking for aesthetic things. But again, I think Store Envy's audience is much younger than what you would see on Etsy. The last one is Ticktail. Ticktail, I've noticed, tends to have sellers who moved from Etsy or Store Envy into Ticktail, and because of that, they tend to be people who might have been selling online already for a while before having made that move to Ticktail. In terms of customers, I've never seen, like, I've never met anybody in person that uses Ticktail's marketplace. And even when I had a Ticktail, there the fraction of sales coming in from the marketplace was like way lower than the number of like transactions coming in from the marketplace when I was on Store Envy. So it seems more like the customers are all self-driven on Ticktail. Maybe that 10% commission that they take now isn't that big of a deal if you have a storefront. Just something that I've noticed. Okay, so this is the last comparison that I want to do. This is kind of all of the miscellaneous things kind of put together. So shipping capabilities, income like integration, and additional capabilities. So in terms of shipping, again, Etsy's been around for such a long time that they've got this down. They have like a built-in USPS shipping label printer. Shipping labels and things are like that are stuff that I'm going to stream later on as well, but they have that built in. In terms of income path, they will basically take any kind of like money sending service. And for extras, a free account will basically come with everything that you want. But again, they take a lot of commission. That's why they get away with taking so much commission, is because they provide all of these tools that sellers can use. And a lot of people like that. So in terms of Store Envy, um, they are integratable to like a couple different shipping sites. There's ShipStation, there's Shipping Easy. Shipping Easy was the one that I personally used. In terms of income path, they only take PayPal Business or Stripe. You do have to have PayPal Business and not a regular PayPal in order to link it to your Store Envy. In terms of extras, they don't really have a whole lot. You can hook up a domain name, like if you want to put like dagneo.com, you can do that for an extra $5. You can also get like better coupons, again for extra $5, but there's really not a whole lot beside that. For Ticktail, I don't think they have like an automatic integration. When I use Ticktail, I manually imported all of my orders into Shipping Easy. But I think there are companies that can integrate it for you, but it costs extra money. In terms of income path, they also take PayPal, and they're for credit card purchases. They don't use Stripe. They actually use like a direct Ticktail system. So if somebody buys something from your site with credit card, that money will sit in the Ticktail in your Ticktail account, and like every couple days or every week or something, I think you can set it. They will send that money directly to a hooked up bank account. So you don't have to use Stripe, which might be good for some people. In terms of extras, Ticktail offers a lot of stuff at different costs that you can kind of add on. Now that they have that $9 subscription fee, I think a lot of that is actually included in that subscription. But there's also additional ones you can purchase. So I hope I covered everything that people was interested in terms of like the three big like e-commerce stores. I hope that makes sense. I'm actually going to go into a decentralized site because I think this is something a lot more people are now looking into. A decentralized shop is kind of a standalone store. It's not connected to anybody else's store. It doesn't have a marketplace that it's linked to. And so because of that, it has lower traffic, but there is either very low or no commission fee besides your monthly subscription cost. Um, it is also generally much more customizable because a lot of decentralized sites are actually built to be full website builders. So people with businesses will build their entire site on it. And that kind of also falls into this third point that I've made here, which is that on a decentralized site, you can take your store and put it as part of a bigger site. So this is a really good thing for someone who's like making webcomics. So if you have webcomics on one page of your site, you just click and navigate to your shop site and it would, be an online shop, but it's still within that same website or something like that. That's really what it was meant to be for. Just to summarize, it's a really good type of website for artists that have a really specific project that they want to push, like a comic, a webcomic project, or if you have a lot of traffic, because it's lower commission, it might actually be cheaper than having something like an Etsy. At the same time, if you are a new artist, maybe you don't have a lot of social networking followers, it might be a little bit harder to drive that traffic on your own. So that might be something to keep in mind. So these are some of pretty common decentralized sites that I have heard. So we have Wix, Squarespace, Weebly, Big Cartel. I personally use Wix. If anybody has questions on like more details on that, I can definitely answer that. But these are some of mostly the costs of each one, so you guys can kind of compare. For subscription fees, all of these stores have different costs of subscription depending on how long of a time period you buy the subscription for. So you can buy it for 1 month, but it'll be most expensive. But you can also buy like a 2 year subscription, and it'll be like a lot cheaper because that's how they get you to pay for more. For Wix, you can have a site for $14 to $20 depending on how long you pay for, but it goes on sale really often for 50%. So I actually bought mine for 50% off an annual subscription. So I pay actually about $8.50 a month, which is cheaper than Ticktail, and really the main reason I moved from Ticktail to Wix. And it takes no commission on any of your transactions, which is really nice. Wix has a it's not a coding system for their design. It has like a drag and drop, so it almost feels like you're making a PowerPoint except a website. So it's pretty easy to use, and it also has an app that you can use to manage your store for both iOS and Android. And one big thing I like about Wix is that it almost takes like any money program. So it takes PayPal, it takes Stripe. I actually use Square on it. It'll take like even web money. So it takes a lot of different types of income, which is nice if you're someone who doesn't want to use something like Stripe. Okay, so moving on to Squarespace, their cheapest option at $12 to $16 a month still takes 3% commission. In order for you to get a site that doesn't take any commission on your transactions, you have to pay about $26 to $30. But I believe they also go on sale pretty often. They have a lot of templates. Again, they were built to be, website builders, so they're pretty flexible. I think, as far as I understand, they take PayPal and Stripe and not much else. But they also have a seller's management app on your phone and stuff. So Weebly will be $5 to $14 a month if they are able to take 3% commission on your transaction. If you don't want any commission, the price will increase to $21 to $35. Apparently, it's really easy to use. I've actually never used it, so I can't really speak for it. But it also has like a seller's app. The last one is a little bit of an odd one out, and that's Big Cartel. So the other three, Wix, Squarespace, and Weebly, are all website builders. They're built so that the shop is supposed to be part of a bigger site, but Big Cartel is made just to have a storefront. It's almost like having a Ticktail or Store NB without the marketplace. And so it's really built for independent artists. You can actually use it for free for up to 5 items, like absolutely free. I'm still a little bit confused as to how they make money based off of that, but you can have a free store on Big Cartel. Um, if you want more items on your store, it costs $10 a month, and then it kind of goes up from there. I think the highest is at like 300 items, and that's closer to like $50 a month, I think. But I think in terms of Artist Alley, like people, we don't have like 300 items anyway, so it might be nice. So they will take PayPal Business, Square, and Stripe in terms of payment. They don't have an Android app, they only have an iOS app apparently. But if they have an iOS, I assume the Android one is coming soon. So there's one big one that I didn't list here at all, and that is Shopify. The reason I don't have it on here is because Shopify, like the lowest subscription on Shopify, I think starts at like $29, and it's built to be like a really professional website. If that's what you want, that's great. You guys can go check it out. But I think in terms of like the artist alley community, that's generally not what people are looking for. So I didn't include it on this list, but I thought I'd mention it anyway. So we've talked about all of these stores. Um, there's a lot of information that I kind of like vomited out in this stream. I hope it was organized in an okay way, but it can definitely be really overwhelming. So I just have some really quick tips on, how to decide what kind of shop is right for you. And so if you're just starting out and you don't have like merchandise, you just want to try selling your illustrations, and maybe you don't really want to put in a lot of effort yet, you just kind of want to try selling your artwork, it might be a good idea to start with an outsourced shop so that you can just make the art and then that's all you need to worry about. If you are coming in from Artist Alley like I did, you probably already have your merchandise, your own prints, things like that. So you are definitely going to look into a self-fulfilled shop. If you're just starting out, you might want to go into a centralized self-fulfilled shop like Etsy or Store Envy to help with the traffic a little bit. But if you are pretty well established, you already have a really big, Instagram or Twitter following, and a lot of people are asking like, hey, I want to buy your stuff or something like that, it might be good to go into a decentralized self-fulfilled shop so that commission costs don't add up to be like something outrageous. All in all, the main point that I want to make is that every single site has its own like niche. It has its pros, it has its cons. And so based on what you want to do as an artist and how you want to sell your art, just pick something that you think will fit. And don't be afraid to switch sites. I've switched sites like 4 times and I feel kind of bad for my customers, but I am happy kind of with where I'm currently at, and I don't think I would have made it here without kind of trying out different stores. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to just kind of move around and check it out. Okay, so that is it in terms of the stream for today. It was like an entire hour of me like spewing like